Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into one of Middle-earth's greatest mysteries, the fate of the Entwives. From their peaceful gardens to their heartbreaking disappearance, we'll explore the different theories about what really happened to them. If you're a fan of Tolkien's lore, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Who were the wives of the Ents? The Entwives, female counterparts of the Ents, differed from their male partners in both appearance and temperament. While the male Ents were tall and strong, associated with large trees like oaks and elms, the Entwives were more graceful and connected to smaller plants such as fruit trees, shrubs, and flowers. While male Ents guarded the deep forests, the Entwives focused on gardening and agriculture. They shared their knowledge of farming with men and other races, teaching them how to cultivate fruits, vegetables, and cereals. Unlike the reclusive male Ents, the Entwives were more approachable and open to interaction with others. Their love for order and cultivation led them to settle in more structured lands, leaving the wild forest behind. This separation from the Ents eventually became one of Middle-earth's great mysteries. After their lands were destroyed, the Entwives vanished. Whether they were wiped out, fled, or met a different fate remains unknown. The disappearance of the Entwives. Another theory posits that the Entwives, rather than being wiped out or fleeing to distant lands, may have turned into something else entirely. Over time, the Ents themselves slow down and become more tree-like, eventually turning into horns, living trees that retain some consciousness but lose their ability to speak or move. If this fate could befall male Ents, it's possible that grief-stricken Entwives, devastated by the loss of their gardens and lands, may have experienced a similar transformation. The Entwives, so deeply connected to the smaller plants and trees they nurtured, may have, in their sorrow, turned into these very plants, small trees, bushes, and herbs. This transformation could have been a way for them to retreat from the world, planting their roots into the soil, becoming one with the earth they loved. However, unlike the sturdy oaks and elms of the male Ents, the flora associated with the Entwives was more delicate and ephemeral. As time passed, these fragile plants may have withered and disappeared entirely, leaving no trace of the Entwives behind. This theory, though melancholic, suggests that the Entwives didn't vanish without a trace. They simply became part of the natural world they had cherished. Their husbands, still searching for them, may never have realized that the Entwives were all around them, hidden in the very plants and trees they passed by in their long wanderings. Where could the wives of the Ents have gone? The disappearance of the Entwives is often linked to a gradual rift that began long before they vanished. During the First or Second Age, differences in temperament and lifestyle led the Entwives to distance themselves from the male Ents. While the Ents preferred wild, untamed forests, the Entwives focused on cultivating the land, creating gardens and fields along the eastern banks of the Anduin River. In this new land, the Entwives taught men the art of farming, bringing prosperity to the region. Though physically separated, the Entwives and Ents maintained occasional contact, their relationship distant but intact. However, their peaceful lives were shattered during the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age. As men and elves approached Mordor, Sauron enacted a scorched earth policy to prevent his enemies from using nearby resources. The Entwives' carefully tended gardens were among the first to be destroyed. Sauron's forces burned the lands, turning the fertile region into the barren brown lands where nothing could grow. After this devastation, the Entwives disappeared. Whether they perished in the flames, fled to distant lands, or were enslaved by Sauron remains unknown. The male Ents searched for them endlessly, grieving their loss. The fate of the Entwives remains one of Middle-earth's greatest mysteries, with some speculating they may have survived in the East, though no evidence supports this. Still, other theories persist, offering further explanations for their tragic disappearance. The Entwives went to the Shire. Based on indirect clues in Tolkien's letters, one plausible theory suggests that the surviving Entwives may have migrated to the Shire. This theory is supported by the fact that the hobbits became remarkably skilled farmers, cultivating a variety of grains, vegetables, grapes, and other crops. The Shire's peaceful setting, far from the conflicts that ravaged Middle-earth, combined with its ideal climate for agriculture, would have made it an appealing refuge for the Entwives. Their natural connection to farming and nurturing life might have drawn them to such a tranquil place where they could continue their work. In the Two Towers, when the hobbits described the Shire to Treebeard, he showed interest and even asked them to notify him if they ever encountered any Entwives there. This detail fuels speculation that the Entwives may have found a new home in the Shire. Additionally, Sam Gamgee recalled a story about a relative who saw a walking tree near the Shire, possibly suggesting that an Ent or Entwife had wandered into the area. While this heartwarming theory offers hope that the Entwives found peace in the Shire, it remains just one of many possibilities. The wives of the Ents chose to flee east. One theory about the fate of the Entwives suggests that, instead of perishing in flames or moving west across war-torn lands, they might have fled east. In this lesser-known region, untouched by the conflict between Sauron and the Free Peoples, they may have sought refuge, hoping to rebuild their beloved gardens. The East, though vast and wild, presented challenges with its desolate steppes and desert landscapes. Yet the Entwives' deep connection to the earth might have driven them to attempt to cultivate even these harsh environments. The eastern lands, largely uncharted by the men and elves of the West, remain mysterious, raising questions about how the Entwives would have been received by any inhabitants they encountered. Perhaps they met nomadic tribes unfamiliar with such beings, and it's uncertain whether they were welcomed or met with fear and suspicion. The wild, isolated lands of the East may not have been the sanctuary the Entwives had hoped for. The difficult environment and potential hostility from the region's peoples could have made survival difficult. However, there is a possibility that some Entwives managed to establish hidden groves in the most remote corners of the East, continuing their ancient traditions in seclusion, far from Sauron's influence. This theory provides a glimmer of hope, suggesting that the Entwives may have survived in obscurity, tending their secret gardens. The unexplored eastern lands offer the perfect backdrop for their hidden existence, leaving open the possibility that their descendants or groves may one day be discovered by adventurous souls. The Entwives were enslaved by Sauron. Another theory proposes a darker fate for the Entwives, that they were enslaved by Sauron, who valued their agricultural skills to support his war efforts. As a strategic ruler, Sauron would have recognized the Entwives' deep knowledge of cultivation as invaluable, especially given the desolate nature of Mordor and the less fertile lands to the south and east. With massive armies to feed, Sauron needed resources, and the Entwives' ability to coax life from even barren soils could have made them vital assets. Mordor itself was barren, and Sauron's southern and eastern territories, home to the Haradrim and Easterlings, were less fertile than western lands. To sustain his war machine, Sauron might have captured the Entwives, forcing them into servitude under orc overseers. Instead of nurturing their own gardens, the Entwives may have been coerced into establishing agriculture for Sauron's armies. Their once beautiful gardens could have been transformed into mere fields of grain and vegetables to feed his soldiers. In this grim scenario, the Entwives would have been reduced to tools of war, their gifts exploited until they were no longer needed. Sauron, relentless in his pursuit of dominance, would have shown no mercy once they had outlived their usefulness. The Entwives may have been driven to exhaustion or even death before being cast aside, a tragic end for those who once nurtured life. This theory casts a heavy shadow over their disappearance, suggesting that the Entwives may have suffered under Sauron's reign, their fate intertwined with the very destruction they had always sought to avoid. The Entwives, overwhelmed by grief, have turned into the plants. Another poignant theory suggests that the Entwives, overwhelmed by grief, may have transformed into the very plants they once cared for. Just as some male Ents, over time, become more tree-like and eventually turn into Hurns, beings that lose their mobility and speech, planting their roots deep into the earth, the Entwives could have experienced a similar fate. After the devastating loss of their gardens and lands, the Entwives' deep connection to the plants they nurtured, combined with their immense sorrow, may have driven them to retreat into themselves, eventually becoming the very plants they loved. Unlike their male counterparts, who were tied to large, long-lived trees like oaks and elms, the Entwives were connected to smaller, more delicate flora, fruit trees, shrubs, herbs, and flowers. If they turned into these fragile plants, their transformation would have been quiet and sorrowful. Over time, their more delicate forms may have withered and disappeared, leaving no trace. Unlike the towering trees that survived as horns, the Entwives' transformation may have led to their fading away completely, erasing their presence from the world. This theory adds a sense of tragic inevitability to the Entwives' disappearance. Instead of being lost to battle or fleeing to distant lands, they became part of the earth they once cultivated. The Ents, endlessly searching for their lost companions, may never have realized that the Entwives were all around them, silently merging with the landscape in sorrowful stillness. The Entwives were destroyed during Sauron's brutal campaign. The simplest and perhaps most tragic theory is that the Entwives were destroyed during Sauron's Scorched Earth campaign. Unlike the male Ents, who were strong and capable of defending their forests, such as during the assault on Isengard, the Entwives were peaceful, gentler beings, more attuned to nurturing life than engaging in conflict. Without the physical strength or battle-hardened nature of the male Ents, the Entwives may have been overwhelmed by the flames and violence. Trapped in lands essential to Sauron's war efforts, they were likely caught in his relentless destruction of anything that could aid his enemies. In this version, the Entwives simply perished, consumed by the devastation they were powerless to escape. The male Ents, devastated by this loss, have spent centuries searching for their partners, unable to accept their fate. The Ents, with their slow and deliberate nature, may have clung to the faint hope that the Entwives survived somewhere, despite all evidence pointing to their destruction. Even Treebeard in his laments seemed unwilling to fully accept that they were gone forever, holding out hope for a reunion. This theory, while deeply sorrowful, reflects the harsh realities of Middle-earth's often tragic history. The Entwives, dedicated to peace and growth, may have fallen victim to Sauron's ruthless power. Though more appealing ideas of survival or transformation exist, the brutal truth is that the Entwives likely met their end in the flames, a sobering reminder that war spares no one, not even those who dedicate themselves to nurturing life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed exploring the mysterious fate of the Entwives, be sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating Middle-earth lore. Let us know in the comments which theory you think is most likely. Until next time, keep the discussion alive and the stories flowing.